Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live session with Vasa. Joining me today is we've got Garth back again, Garth Cullis, who is from Fairham, Wortham, and Beckham. Garth Cullis is, Fairbridges. Garth's experience includes drafting various commercial agreements, including franchise agreements, shareholder agreements, share sale agreements, pledge agreements, commercial leases, and documentation for mergers and acquisitions and memorandum of articles. So thank you for joining us today, Garth. How are you? And thank you everyone for joining us out there.
Morning, Romani. Morning, viewers. Thanks for having me. I'm well, and yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Good. Just seems to have a rocky start today, but all good. Today's topic is one of a very interesting topic, cannabis and the Cannabis Bill. Are you wanting to use it in your restaurant? Are you wanting to sell it somewhere? What are the laws? What is the bill? What is it all about? Are you interested in cannabis? So if you have any questions, please pop them in the comment box below. We will always pass them on to Garth. And let's get started. So Garth, tell us about the bill. What is the bill and how does it differ from an act? And what is the legal status of the Cannabis Bill?
Well, firstly, when we talk about the bill, it's still a law that's in process of being implemented. So it's not law yet. So that's how it differs from an act, which is already established law. So this bill is currently in the review process. It's been approved by Cabinet, but Parliament still has to approve. There might be some changes going forward. They might take some public comments into consideration because generally some people aren't happy about how this bill is drafted. It's still in its draft stages. It's not law yet, but this just gives an idea of what's to come. And there's still a bit to do before it becomes final law. So when it becomes an act, then it will be law. And there will be a commencement date saying when it starts, when it's effective. But we still have to reach that stage, Germany.
Okay, so it means that we still can, so laws could change before it becomes like a final set in stone.
Yeah, I foresee some changes happening. I think there's still too much unhappiness within the public domain. I think they're busy reviewing it, and I think as time goes on, I think there might be a few changes and it might be more in line with what people think are fair and what Parliament thinks is fair. So it's still in that draft stage. It's still a bill, and that's the difference between a bill and an act. Bill is not yet law, and act is.
So what does that mean when one wants to distribute or sell cannabis in their business?
Well, in current format, the bill doesn't allow the sale of cannabis. So you can't you can't smoke it in public, you can't make a profit, you can't sell, and you can only smoke it in your private sphere. So currently you can't really have it in your business. Like I said, if there's changes, making provision for the commercialization of cannabis, we might reach that stage, but currently looking at the bill, they don't want any commercialization of cannabis for recreational use. So currently,
is that different to the cannabis products that people are selling? Are we talking about two different things here? Because I have seen, like, for example, I don't know if it was last year, but I attended a cannabis event, and they were ready to sell products like the cannabis tea and cannabis herbs and oils. And is that different?
Yeah, it is different because CBD oil can be sold and bought over the counter, subject to some conditions. That's why you had a situation last year. I think it was called Cacio. They had the Taha pizza. So what that meant was they lightly poured some CBD oil over the pizza. It gives you a sort of a calming effect, and it's unlikely that you'll get high over that. But because CBD oil can be sold subject to conditions, small dosages, no promises on the packaging, but because CBD oil is legal and they don't see any risks or possible addiction to it, that's why you can have certain products contain CBD oil, and that differs from actual cannabis. that is being smoked for recreational purposes, and the CBD oil they deem more for medicinal purposes, and that's why you see I've seen besides Kolkata, I think there was a sushi place that the drop of CBD oil in, and that's because they can do that. It's because it is legal, and we have to distinguish between what's allowed and what's not, so we don't run in the risk of getting into trouble.
Okay. And then you can obviously have a shop where you can sell cannabis, which would be the CBD oil and the CBD products and soaps and creams, like I saw at this exhibition. Okay. So that's the two distinct differences. And for which purposes can I use the cannabis, and how much can one possess?
Well, the cannabis, for recreational use, can only be useful in private, in your home, or maybe with friends in your home. Only for private use, so not for public use, not for sale. You can, according to the draft bill, and it's not an act yet, but if it gets passed as such, they're talking about having 600 grams if you live alone, 1.2 kilos if it's more than one person in the house. Can't smoke around children or near non-consenting adults. When you're walking around in public, you can have 100 grams on you if it's concealed, hidden away. And you, according to the bill, it's not, kind of my stress is not law yet. You can give as a gift to someone 100 grams, as long as you're not making any money off it. So you can't get any commercial benefit out of it. So you can have, if it goes through as an act as is, you can have it 100 grams on you in public, concealed. Maybe give it to someone. But again, don't smoke near non-consenting adults. Don't smoke near children, because the bill, making provision for jail sentences for offences such as that. And I foresee if this bill gets passed, the act, if you walking around with a kilo around you and kilo of weed around you, as they call it, they will assume that you're dealing, which is strictly prohibited. So while they trying to get in the flow of having private use of cannabis, they still strictly want to prohibit the sale thereof. And that we have to draw that distinction, because it's important. You don't want to run into trouble. So in your home, not around the children, completely concealed. If you're walking around with some 100 gram, if this gets passed as an act, I have to stress again, and it has to be concealed. It mustn't be in plain sight for other members of the public to see.
And what is the difference between the regulation between recreational cannabis and medicinal? So that, I think we've just discussed, really, isn't it? What is the difference in medicinal?
Yeah, there's a few more differences to touch on. Is that medicinal cannabis is regulated by the Medicines Act. You need a license for that, for medicinal purposes, and there's strict requirements. It will cost a lot of money. Not the admin as such, but the measures put in place for when the inspection takes place. They needed a certain way, certain secure, certain ventilation, which costs a lot of money. Strictly for medicinal purposes that you need a license for, to grow and to sell in that way. So not for recreational purposes. Recreational cannabis, we're still in the draft stages. We still have a bill, so we don't have an act. It's not as regulated as medicinal medicine, which is regulated through the Medicines Act and the Medical Control Board.
Do you need a license to be able to sell medicinal cannabis?
Yes, you do need a license, and you need to apply.
So let's say I'm a business and I'm a shop and I want to start up a cannabis store. So I have to apply for a license. It would be different from someone who's, say, growing cannabis, to the medicinal cannabis to sell.
Yeah, it would be different. So you need a license for that as well, and you also apply to the Medical Control Board, and they have the inspection and such. So a costly process.
Okay. And is it a relatively easy process or quite complicated?
No, it'll be quite complicated because there's lots of measures that you have to put in place. So it's complicated and it is costly. So you really need to have lots of money for that. I think it could, because when we look at the admin fees, you see a few thousand and you think that's all it is. No, but when you look deeper into what measures you have to put in place when the inspector comes, you'll see that it costs a lot of money to get certain ventilators, certain secure buildings, and to meet the standards that is required in terms of the Medicines Act. It's very costly and complicated and could take
Is
a
that
while.
buying or selling?
For both, it's
Oh,
very, yeah.
oh wow, you
But
have to
for
go.
growing, it would be a bit more.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, definitely to inspect and yeah, it's a costly process and not one that you should embark without taking on the proper legal advice.
Or are you doing your kind of doing your due diligence and doing proper research,
Yes, yes, yeah. You don't want to be caught out and spend lots of money for
and then
failure.
it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And how does the bill restrict previously disadvantaged persons from the same access to cannabis?
Is that the complaints in the public that because of the strict measures of the bill, that you can only grow it in your home and not distribute and sell really. And not many people have the facilities to grow cannabis, and so they don't have the right to enjoy it. They can't grow. Um, there's no space. They don't have the means for it. They don't have a garden and so forth, and so they can't get unless someone is giving them the 100 gram as a gift. And so to the larger public, when it's a bit restricted, don't have access and to follow the bill as is in order to enjoy that cannabis if that's their preference. And so, yeah, it does in a roundabout way discriminate against previously disadvantaged people because they don't have the access to grow this cannabis and to enjoy it and as they like. So it's a big problem.
Well, I suppose it's you kind of one like anybody. I mean, whether you previously or not, you kind of need the proper facilities, you need the proper equipment, you have to
Mm.
follow certain guidelines. So I guess that one would have to kind of apply to get the building place in place and the facilities in place and go through the process. Can I ask you just quickly, what does that entail? Do you know?
Is this for the medicinal or recreational purposes? For
Yes,
the for the
medicinal,
this
medicinal.
yeah, so you need to get there needs to be proper security measures in place. There needs to be proper ventilation for the plants. It needs to meet certain health standards. That's basically what it is, but getting that is very difficult and it costs a lot of money. I would say millions to get the proper facilities in and the proper security measures and the plans. Also, the besides the fees for the licenses and the renewals and yeah, so it is a very costly process.
Okay, okay. And can you grow it in your garden? Are you allowed to? I've just had a question here from Lisa, I think.
Can you grow it in your garden only for private recreational purposes? Because the
Okay.
bill is not an act yet, those amounts are not law yet, and so there is a risk that police might feel you're growing too much. There's no proper guidelines right now, and that's why people are desperately wanting a bill subject to some amendments to be passed and act so they can have security about how much they can grow, how much they can smoke, in which circumstances. Right now, there's lots of uncertainty because it's not a law yet. So you could grow it in your garden, but careful. And I wouldn't really advise growing any until it gets past the act, and then you'll know exactly what you can grow, the correct amounts, and what you can do. But one thing I think will be certain is that you won't ever be able to smoke around children. You
Mm.
have to be 18 years old to smoke cannabis privately, and you can never smoke it in public. Um, so is that if you have children, it could be a bit difficult. They could just run in the yard and you not knowing that they're there, and then you've breached the law,
Okay.
which is yeah. And well, having a look through the possible penalties, it's quite severe. Um, 15 years for dealing you can get. About 4 years for smoking around a child, around 2 for smoking around non-consenting adults. Those are years in prison. And there's some hefty crimes where some criminals walk out with less. So that's also another thing to consider. I wouldn't advise going forward until there's a set act in place so that people can know exactly what to follow, where to smoke, how to smoke. But it's good that the draft is out now so people have an idea. So there will probably be some changes, but I don't think wholesale changes.
Okay. Well, that is very interesting. It's good to know because one is always not sure what you can and can't do when it comes to cannabis, and especially for your business. And I think I did do an exercise, and when I went to that expo, it was very interesting to go and see the different things that they were putting together, and it's all very exciting. But yes, it seems like quite a lengthy process to apply, and you have to have a lot of stuff in place. So please make sure you do your research before you go and embark on getting a premises and deciding to do it. Make sure you get a clear list of what it is you need to be able to say grow cannabis for medicinal purposes, or even for be able to offer it as a product in your store. I see Herschel is saying that unfortunately the public will exploit the cannabis situation, especially in low socioeconomic areas. Thank you for sharing. And some people use them in tea. Lisa says some people use them in tea and in other uses, not just smoking. Absolutely. People use it as oil. You get it in oil format. You also get it in a cream format, I've seen. Edibles as well. So very many ways of being able to consume the medicinal use. Yes. Any final thoughts before we close, Garth?
Well, I would just like to add that knowledge is power. You can make a mistake. It's impossible for everyone to know all the laws, and nobody makes a mistake on purpose. Otherwise, it's not a mistake, and you can still be punished. So just be careful. Is my final thoughts. If you're uncertain about anything, rather check before acting and keep up to date with the timelines. I mean, I think when this becomes final act, it's definitely worth a follow up so we can then fully address what is and what isn't allowed. I think that will be very informative when there's more certainty so that people can know exactly what they can do. And who knows if there are any changes, what changes will be made. And it could be some positive changes which alleviates the burden and maybe makes more provision for previously disadvantaged communities to have access to cannabis if that's their preference. And so, yeah, my final thoughts is let's wait for what changes there are. Will they take public comments into consideration when passing the act? And yeah, and I definitely feel it's worth a follow up when this finally becomes law, so that you can be fully assured of what you can and can't do. But yeah, on that note, I say knowledge is power. Keep up to date. And if there's any questions, rather ask before acting.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And if you have any further questions, you can just pop them in the comment box below. If you would like to get hold of Garth and his team, they are at Fair Bridges, Wortham and Beckham. We have posted their link in the comment box below. And once again, just a reminder that we have these interviews regularly. If you'd like to know more about them, you can just inbox us. And to remind you that FASA is a non-profit organization that protects, lobbies, protects, and develops ethical franchising across all sectors within South Africa, with a specific focus on transformation. FASA offers membership to both existing franchisors and franchisees who support ethical franchising. If you would like to know more about what FASA does, you can visit them at www.fasa.co.za. Thank you once again for everyone for joining us, and have a super week going forward. Bye.
Bye, everyone.